Welcome to the Stormsurf video surf forecast for the week starting Sunday, March 29th. Looking at the North Pacific significant wave height chart, we see an area, broad area actually, of seas, but nothing even 18 foot. This remnants of a gale that pushed from Japan over the dateline into the Gulf days prior, generating up to 25-foot seas and producing swell. That swell has already hit Hawaii and is bound for the U.S. West Coast. Also, Typhoon Masick, currently tracking to the west, 80 knot sustained winds, no recurvature to the north expected. Let's dive into the details. First, we take a look at jet stream level winds. These winds, up about 30,000 feet, help support the formation of storms, and when those storms do form, help direct their travel path. Currently, the jet stream is not encouraging. Very weak wind pattern over the west and split. A little bit of a trough here in the Gulf, but only with about 110 knot winds supporting it. This trough here supports low pressure. That is a dip in the jet, helps support a formation of a counterclockwise circulation in the upper atmosphere and down at the surface, and that is the hallmark of low pressure. Anyway, the jet stream splits east of there, working its way up into British Columbia and then south towards the equator. No real support for storm development is indicated. As we roll this out, the trough that was in the Gulf works its way to the eastern Gulf, but with no winds associated with it, moving onshore by Tuesday. Split pattern continues in the west. A little bit of winds trying to build here by supposedly on Tuesday. That is about 130 knot winds. Easing off the coast of the Kuril Islands. A little bit more wind energy coming in behind it to support a little bit of a trough here, but it's mainly just pinched off, not looking particularly strong, and fading as it works its way to the east. Notice here a fully split jet, dead air in between the two streams, typically only supportive of high pressure development. We roll this out. That split pattern, high pressure we assume at the surface, only gets worse into Friday and into the weekend, and it just continues. Then the whole thing unravels across the entire North Pacific into Sunday and into nearly Monday, and that's it. It suggests that the North Pacific is pretty much winding down for the season, and an early wind down at that. It's not even the end of March yet. And that's more than likely the result of the MJO going inactive in the West Pacific. We'll get more into that later. Next, we take a look at surface level pressure and surface level winds. Notice high pressure already in control over the dateline, 1028 millibars, weak low pressure in the Gulf of Alaska, as expected, and no real fetch of interest going on, and here's Typhoon Masick. Anyway, roll this out. Masick continues to the west and is basically going to work its way into the Philippines. And we just sort of watch here. We're looking for anything that suggests gale development. Here we go. A little bit of an area on like Tuesday night, 35 knot winds over a small area, working its way through the northern Gulf. Maybe supportive of 20-foot seas would roughly be a guess. 35 knot winds do about that. Continuing into Friday or so, notice big high pressure here. A lot of north winds off the California coast. That will likely mean upwelling, cooler water temperatures, but also could mean wind swell as well. Another little tropical system projected per the GFS model here out on Friday. We'll believe it when we see it. Anyway, and we're into Saturday now, 1036 millibar high taking over the Gulf of Alaska. That will lock down and prevent any low pressure development from occurring, at least in that area. But notice a little bit of fetch working its way down the coast here, and north winds continuing off the U.S. West Coast. Roll this out further, more of the same, just not a whole lot going on. From this chart, it also looks as if the North Pacific is going to sleep. So finally, we'll take a look at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean. We're going back in time Wednesday. We want to show you the gale. Here it is on Thursday morning, 20, 22, 24, maybe 25-foot seas in the West Pacific, working their way across the dateline and then into the Gulf of Alaska, sort of falling apart. This now by Saturday, that was 24 hours ago. That was the end of it. This swell from that system has already hit Hawaii, bound into the U.S. West Coast on Monday. That, along with existing wind swell and southern hemi swell, will make a 3 different swell trains hitting all at the same time. Pick your spots carefully. Use your local knowledge to find the best spots given these conditions. Anyway, we roll this out into Monday. Not a whole lot going on. And then By about Tuesday night, we see that little gale forecast in the northwest Gulf of Alaska, small area of 20-foot seas. It meanders its way to the east into almost Thursday morning, sort of falls apart, regenerates a little bit supposedly on Thursday with, what is that, almost 24-foot seas, and then moves its way into British Columbia. Good for swell in the 13, maybe 14-second period range, mainly for the Pacific Northwest, but some energy down into Central California. But again, the thought is strong northerly winds along the coast will make for copious local wind swell, and whatever swell is generated by this will be masked and hard to find, if at all. Anyway, and we roll that out, we're going into, 180 hours and basically nothing going on. So the North Pacific, not real productive. One more Gulf swell and local wind swell, plus southern hemiswell already in the water. Also, let's take a look at the South Pacific Ocean. We're going back almost a week and a half. Friday, not just last Friday, but Friday before that. The extratropical remnants of what was Super Typhoon Pan fell south, redeveloped off of New Zealand, got a small pulse of seas in the 38-foot range, I believe. That produced a small pulse of swell into California earlier, or in the Thursday-Friday time frame. That swell fell apart. Pam worked its way to the east, redeveloped, here we go, with 45-foot seas, very small area, and mainly aimed to the east. South America did real well from this one, and even up into Puerto, but sideband energy radiating to the north into California on about the 190-degree path. That's for both Southern California and Northern California. Anyway, that system it pulsed a second time here on week out. That was Saturday night, not the past Saturday, but a week ago. And again, more swell for South America. And then Pam died out. We went through the week, not a whole lot happened. And so there's no other significant or even minor southern hemi swell in the water. And we'll take a look here now at the forecast for the next week, just going through this real quick. A little bit of a gale here forecast under New Zealand on Wednesday. That is 36, maybe 38-foot seas, but notice the track. It's almost falling southeast. That's not good relative to Southern California. It's on the 213 to 208 degree track, pretty much shadowed by Tahiti, and not what you want these storms to do is be pushing up the Great Circle tracks, not down and away from them. So not very encouraging. That one falls off, and then pretty much nothing else after that, just rather benign pattern. It's very early in the season, though. You don't typically see southern hemi swells in March. Look more in the mid to late April time frame for things to start ramping up. So we've had a good run, though, already. It's kind of fun, kind of interesting, and nice to see at least some swell from some direction in the water. Next, we take a look at long-term indicators. What's going to be happening a month, 2 months, 3 months out, or more. Currently, the Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Negative numbers represent the active phase of the MJO. A prolonged run of negative numbers represent the possible formation of El Nino. Currently, the daily average, or daily number, minus 14.10. The 30-day running average, down, minus 10.35. This is good news. And the 90-day running average, minus 6.85. It's been hovering in the minus 8 to minus 6 range for months now, since mid-October. No real change. This is good news. It suggests some sort of El Nino is trying to happen. Modoki El Nino, currently in flight. Nothing super significant, but maybe more. Let's get into the details. Here's a graphical depiction of the 30-day SOI average. Notice big drop in January of last year, kind of rebounded a little bit, then went negative. Again, this is at minus 8 to minus 6 degree range that it was held in all of last year. Little rebound here in the February time frame, and now bam, back down to negative. Here's where we are at current. All this, if you're south of this end of the line, and the more south, the better, the stronger the El Nino. This suggests just very weak to moderate El Nino territory, and that's exactly where we are. But it's better to be on this side of the line than up here where we were in 2013 and 2012. Next, we examine trade winds and the anomalies in those trade winds for this time of year for this location. Here's the Philippines, Australia. The area we're most interested in is right here from about 135 to about 170, couple degrees either side of the equator. Draw a box here. If you see arrows blowing from the west, those are westerly anomalies. That is a relaxation of trades or an out-and-out full-on change in trades, reversal of trades. When winds do that, they take warm water piled up here in the West Pacific, start pushing it to the east. It falls to depth and creates what's known as a Kelvin wave. Those Kelvin waves will travel across the entire width of the Pacific Ocean, gurgle up off of the Galapagos Islands, and start warming normally what would be cold waters in that area, and this is the hallmark of El Nino. Right now, weak westerly anomalies. There has been a massive westerly wind burst that's been blowing since about the second week in January. It really peaked out in early March, around the 10th or so. Extremely strong, full reversal of trades, 25-knot westerly winds in this region. Very rare. Same thing happened last year, same time. That was the setup for the Modoki El Nino currently in flight, and what we believe is a change in the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. That is a 15 to 30-year cycle. The thought is that maybe we are moving towards an era that is more favorable for the support or the development of El Nino, and therefore more favorable for storm development in both the North Pacific and the South Pacific over the long haul. That is the thought, that is the theory. It is not guaranteed, and that is perhaps an optimistic outlook, but optimism at this point is better than pessimism. Anyway, working our way to the East Pacific, pretty much very, very weak westerly anomalies here south of Hawaii. Not really indicative of El Nino or the active phase of the MJO, and then just neutral anomalies going off to the east. Next, we look at the forecast a week out. A very interesting forecast at that. Notice moderate plus strength westerly anomalies projected right in the heart of the Kelvin wave generation area. Now this, we're supposed to be moving out of the active phase of the MJO into the inactive phase, and yet here we go, westerly anomalies. This would be symptomatic of El Nino if it were to occur. Looking off to the east, we see light east anomalies. This is pretty typical of the Modoki El Nino pattern here under Hawaii. Light east anomalies in the East Pacific, strong west anomalies in the West Pacific, a convergence point somewhere right around the date line, and that is the connection point between the two Walker circulations, both meeting here and then pushing air upwards. So here's another way of looking at this. The reds, purples are westerly anomalies. The blues, easterly anomalies. We want westerly anomalies. We want them in the Kelvin wave generation area. The Kelvin wave generation area is roughly from here to about here. This is the whole world laid out here, and we're just interested in this one small patch, just a little bit either side of the equator. And notice, we're going to go back in time. Here's February, and westerly anomalies were in play all of January, and then we got into March, and things just went really quite very strong. Most impressive westerly wind burst went the whole way through March. Here we are at the end of March, and now it's forecast to actually return a little bit. Not particularly strong, but return a little bit. Regardless, this just continued pattern of westerly anomalies is basically a heat pump, pumping, transferring warm water from the West Pacific to the East Pacific. Some positive result will come to that because this smells very much like El Nino in development. Next, we look at outgoing long-wave radiation predictions. That is, how much sunlight's reflected or how much energy is reflected off the ocean surface. The more reflection, the greater the odds of high pressure and trade winds. That's what the reds and the oranges represent. So per this model, the statistic model, it suggests that the inactive phase, and this is the inactive phase, the MJO, is supposed to take root for the next 2 weeks, while the active phase again builds in the Indian Ocean, starting to work its way to the east, but not making any progress into the West Pacific over the next 2-week period. The interesting part is the dynamic model agrees, yes, the inactive phase is trying to get a foothold, But it says it's going to die out completely, and 2 weeks out we're going to be into a dead neutral pattern. Neutral patterns, or when you see the models suggesting strong active, inactive phases and they never materialize, that's a hallmark of El Nino. We're not saying that's going to happen. All models are fallible, but if this outcome were to develop, this would be the best outcome, something we're looking towards. Next, we look at upper level projections. This is a 40-day projection, so a little bit, almost a month and a half. The oranges and yellows represent the inactive phase of the MJO, or let's said another way, they actually represent areas not supportive of precipitation. The precipitation cycle is a hallmark of the MJO cycle. So per this model, the inactive phase is to work its way east into South America through about the 28th of April, and then the inactive phase develops, the active phase develops and starts working its way through the West Pacific to the East Pacific into the early part of March, and then another inactive phase. The interesting thing is this model predicted a very, very strong MJO signal, both active and inactive, and then now lately it's really backed off, looking much more weak and kind of like last year to a certain extent. This latest run, this is a little bit stronger than what was previously predicted. So we'll see how this plays out. Again, this is a 40-day model, so we don't have a whole lot of faith in it, but it gives you at least a sense of what's to come. Next, we look at sea surface temperature anomalies. That's differences in temperature for what is normal for any of these areas in the globe for this time of year. Notice we're looking at February, not current data, because what we want you to see is this: cool water all along Peru and over the Galapagos Islands. Not impressive, certainly not a sign of El Nino. You'd want to see warm water all here. Now we do see warm water all in this region, and the main El Nino region is here from 120 to about 170, and just a couple degrees either side of the equator. This is what they call the Nino 3.4 region. This area here is Nino 1 and 2. Normally it is the Nino 3.4 region. You look to see strong, wet, warm temperatures, and that would be a hallmark of El Nino. We have weak temperatures here, indicative of a Modoki El Nino, and cool waters here. This is in February. And here we go, current image a month and a half later. Look at this. Warm water building well down the entire South American coast. The hallmark of El Nino is warm water building up along Peru. The Peruvian fishermen lose all their fish. Their catches die off because of the warmth. They're used to an offshore flow here, a lot of upwelling, nutrient-rich water coming to the surface and creating a area very favorable for harvesting fish. The warm water moves in. That's the end of that. Certainly warm water developing now and filling in pretty much the entire way across the equator. Still, this pocket here of cooler waters, this happened last year, and it took a long time for it to back off. The other thing that's really interesting, look at all the warm water stacked up along the U.S. West Coast. This whole area here, we're nowhere near the tropical season, and already the waters are definitely warmer than normal. Now, we know that north winds are forecast to blow hard over North and Central California all this week. That will definitely drop temperatures, but still, they're well above normal for this time of year. This normally is the upwelling season. Spring north winds blow. You would expect it to be quite chilly. It's not at all. Anyway, it is this area that is most interesting right now. And again, here's another view of it. Anomalies, warm water all along the South American coast. And this building just in the past couple of weeks, this suggests early signs of a large Kelvin wave working its way into the coast, and of course the U.S. West Coast warm pool as well. This cool finger here, this is a hallmark of the active phase or the positive phase of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. So perhaps an entire oceanic basin transition is in play. Here's yet another view of temperatures. These are absolute temperatures, absolute wind speeds, based on buoys on the ocean surface strung the whole way across the equator. It's not the absolutes that matter, but notice this. Actual westerly winds yesterday, still blowing, complete reversal of trades, still in effect, even though, one, the inactive phase of the MJO is supposedly occurring, and the active phase is supposedly dead. West winds still persist. Anomalies The bottom chart here, even stronger, blowing. Again, feeding Kelvin wave development, warm temperatures, 1 degree above normal on the equator in the Nino 1.2 region, dropping off to about a half a degree, and then up to 1.5 here over the dateline on the far western periphery of the Nino 3.4 region. And though the surface warming is interesting, it's the subsurface temperature profile that really is what's driving everything. These are absolute temperatures. This is the West Pacific here, the East Pacific here, down 100, 200, 300 meters. Big pool of warm water right here, and warm water also, but much shallower in the East Pacific. But again, like the other charts we've seen, it's not the absolute temperatures. It is the anomalies, differences from normal. A large pool of nearly 5 degree above normal water temperatures at about 150 meters and down about due south of Hawaii on the equator. This is a large Kelvin wave, and notice this 3-degree anomalies already working their way into the Galapagos. This is what is driving the warm water that's building up along the coast of Peru and South America. But the interesting part, the previous chart, remember we saw more westerly anomalies occurring, more warm water, and you can actually see it in this picture, this little just slightly different shades of gray here. Warm water falling to depth, feeding this pocket, and the winds that blew very hard in February, that warm water is just starting to develop and become realized here in this pool. We expect this pool to grow even larger and build, and then temperatures should continue to escalate as the warm water works its way towards the surface. We do not expect eruption of the main core of the pool until starting in the May time frame. With the big strong winds that blew in February, that warm water shouldn't even start erupting until June 1st. So we have a ways to go. Much warming in flight. If it's already hitting the Peruvian coast now, it's only going to get warmer. This is a good sign, what one would look for if El Nino were developing. Here's another view, same just different model. All the data is hard data coming off of buoys and sensors off of the anchor lines of those buoys, but it's the gaps in between. And here you can see more warm water, this little area right here falling to depth. Here is the core of the pool. This model says 5 to 6 degrees. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 5 to 6 degree anomalies over a much broader area and working its way. And notice this one doesn't even really have the warm water hitting the South American coast yet, but this is as the 24th, so that's what, only about 4 or 5 days ago. So maybe a little bit more eastward progress, but here is the big bulk of the Kelvin wave, nowhere near hitting, 2 months off probably. April, yeah, a month to 2 months off. So much more warming expected. This will be interesting. Something to monitor indeed. And just to note, it is warm water building up in the East Pacific that changes the global atmospheric circulation. It changes the jet stream pattern. This has been proven. This is part of what El Nino is about. As that warm water builds off of the Galapagos Islands and covers more area and starts getting warmer and warmer, what it does is it starts goosing up the jet stream. For one, you get more tropical activity in the East Pacific, and then also tropical activity in the West Pacific. But as the jet changes, it takes those tropical systems, rather than having them drive right into the Philippines, they start recurving or turning to the north, and then eventually the northeast, and in the fall months work their way into the Gulf of Alaska, sometimes turning extratropical and becoming very strong, making for early season large long period swells. That in an ideal situation. We have not seen that for years, but something to look forward to. Anyway, here we are, the CFS version 2 model for the Nino 3.4 region, the main area supported that is used for monitoring El Nino. Currently, water temperatures, Modoki El Nino-ish, 0.6 degrees or so. The forecast projects increases to about, about 1.4 degrees in July, pushing to 1.8 in October, 1.9 degrees above normal maybe in November. That would be a respectable moderate plus strength El Nino if it were to occur. Now, this model has been sort of overhyping the El Nino thing for quite a while, so we don't really believe it. Other models, when you look at the consensus, they continue to suggest more of the same sort of situation. That is, more of a Modoki El Nino, temperatures hovering in about the half a degree to maybe 0.8 degrees. So we'll see. We are in what they call the spring unpredictability barrier. From March till about late May, you never really know what the atmosphere is going to do, but based on what we're seeing right now, we're seeing a lot of warm water building up in South America. That is surely a sign. Massive Kelvin wave. Westerly anomalies. Again, all these are the hallmarks of El Nino. We'll see what happens. Until we get to June, July, or August, though, nothing is a done deal. So we'll just, in fact, this same pattern developed last year, same time, same thing, and then all we got was a weak Modoki El Nino. No precipitation to speak of for California, and nothing particularly exciting surf-wise for the winter months. So we'll see what happens. Definitely a note of caution with all this, but we'll remain somewhat optimistic. So for now, for Northern California and the Hawaiian Islands, wind swell appears to be the case. Energy from the Gulf of Alaska intermixed. Maybe another little pulse of Gulf swell later in the week, but north winds along the California coast to be the norm. Probably cooling of water temperatures. Not a whole lot going on in the South Pacific. So the surf forecast is not great long term for now. Get that whatever southern hemi and wind swell you can now. Long term, El Nino. And the MJO is in the inactive state, but indications on the surface are not saying it's inactive at all, with westerly anomalies still in play and still forecast for the West Pacific. Kelvin wave in flight. That's the thing to watch long term. We'll see whether we get some sort of an El Nino or not. But for now, go get some surf. Enjoy yourself. We'll do this again next week. Same time, same channel.